I just signed the final document. The $15 million prize is now legally mine, and my daughter has been left with absolutely nothing. Not a single cent. I know how that sounds. You're probably thinking I'm a cold, heartless father for taking everything from my only child. But before you cast your judgment, I need you to listen to my side. You need to understand the choice she made, the words she used, and why this wasn't an act of revenge, but an act of justice. My entire world was once contained in a small, two-bedroom house that always smelled faintly of sawdust, and my late wife Helen's rose garden. Chloe was the sun in that world, the reason for every sacrifice I ever made. This is the story of how a $1 lottery ticket, a silly family tradition, exposed a betrayal so deep it changed everything. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions about this story in the comments. It all began on a Tuesday morning with a phone call that I believed was a miracle. It turned out to be a curse. For 40 years, my life was a quiet, steady rhythm played out within the four walls of that house. The mornings were always the same. I'd wake just before the sun, when the world was still bathed in a soft gray light. The first thing I'd feel was the cool, worn leather of my armchair in the living room. It was an old thing, a deep burgundy color, cracked and creased in all the places that knew my shape. Helen had bought it for me for our 10th anniversary, back in 1984. She said a craftsman needed a throne. I'd sit there, a cup of black coffee warming my hands, and just listen to the house breathe around me. It was a language I knew well, the gentle groan of the floorboards, the hum of the old refrigerator, the distant whistle of the 6:15 a.m. train. The air always carried a mix of scents that told the story of my life. There was the permanent, earthy smell of sawdust that clung to my clothes and settled deep into the furniture, a perfume from my years in the workshop. Underneath that was the faint, sweet ghost of Helen's roses, which still bloomed wildly in the backyard every summer, a stubborn testament to her love. I wasn't much of a gardener, but I tended to those roses like they were sacred relics. They were the last living thing she had touched. Every corner of that house held a piece of her. A piece of us. The heavy oak dining table where we shared thousands of meals, its surface covered in a roadmap of tiny scratches and water rings, each one a memory. The framed photo on the mantelpiece of a 6-year-old Chloe on my shoulders at the county fair, her laugh so loud you could almost hear it through the glass. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was the archive of my entire existence. After Helen passed, that quiet rhythm became even more important. It was my anchor. And the most important part of that rhythm was Sunday. Sunday was Chloe's day. Around 4 o'clock, I'd hear her little sedan pull into the driveway, the crunch of gravel a familiar and welcome sound. She'd walk in without knocking, her purse slung over her shoulder, and the whole house would seem to brighten. "Smells good, Dad," she'd always say, even if all I was making was my simple pot roast. We'd sit at that oak table, and she would tell me about her week at the accounting firm, the demanding boss, the funny coworker, her dreams of one day opening her own practice. I lived for those conversations. They were my connection to the world outside my quiet street, my proof that the life Helen and I had built was continuing through her. I saw so much of her mother in her, the same determined set of her jaw when she was focused, the same way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she truly smiled. Our other ritual was the lottery. It started as a joke when Chloe was in college, a way to dream a little. Every Saturday morning, rain or shine, I'd take the 10-minute walk down to Miller's corner store. Old Man Miller, no relation, just a coincidence that made us both chuckle, would have the ticket ready for me. The numbers were always the same, a sacred combination known only to our little family of two. October 22nd, 82, my wedding anniversary. 04, for Helen's birthday in April. And 16, for the day Chloe was born. It was a $1 prayer, a silly little thread of hope that connected our past to a possible future. And every single time, before I left the counter, I'd take out my old ballpoint pen and sign the back, Arthur Miller. It was a lesson from my own father. "An unsigned ticket is a finder's ticket, Artie," he used to say, his voice thick with a Depression-era caution. "You sign your name to what's yours." I'd tuck the ticket into my wallet and hand it to Chloe the next day at dinner for good luck. It was our thing. That last week was no different. The Saturday had been crisp and clear. I bought the ticket, signed my name in the usual spot, and on Sunday I passed it to Chloe as I served her a slice of apple pie. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and tucked it into her purse without a second glance, her mind already on a big presentation she had on Monday. We talked for hours that night, and when she left, she hugged me tight at the door. "Love you, Dad," she said. "See you next Sunday." The house settled back into its familiar quiet, filled with the lingering scent of cinnamon and the warmth of her visit. I went to bed that night content, a simple man living a simple life, completely unaware that the foundation of my world was about to be shattered by a single phone call. The calm before the storm is a funny thing. You never know you're in it until the rain starts to fall. The Tuesday of the phone call bled into a Wednesday of silence. I kept my phone on the small table next to my armchair, its screen dark and lifeless. Every time a car passed on the street, my head would snap up, expecting to see her sedan pull into the driveway. I told myself she was just overwhelmed. $15 million, who wouldn't be? It was a life-altering sum. Of course she needed time. She had lawyers to call, financial advisors to meet. The logical part of my brain understood this, but the part of me that was a father, the part that had held her hand through fevers and scraped knees, felt a cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Her words echoed in the quiet house. "I'll send you something to help out, of course." It sounded less like a daughter sharing her good fortune, and more like an employer promising a bonus. By Friday, the dread was a constant companion. I tried calling her twice. The first time, it rang and rang before clicking over to her cheerful, professional voicemail message. "You've reached Chloe Miller. Please leave a message." It was the same message she used for her clients. There was no warmth in it, no special greeting for family. The second time, late in the afternoon, my call was rejected after a single ring. A small, gray notification popped up on my screen. Call declined. It was a deliberate act. She had seen my name and chosen to ignore it. I placed the phone back on the table, my hand trembling slightly. I looked over at the photo on the mantelpiece, at that smiling little girl on my shoulders. We used to be a team. Now it felt like I was on the outside, looking in at a life I was no longer a part of. The real test was Sunday. For the first time in over a decade, there was no Sunday dinner. But habit is a powerful thing. Around 2 in the afternoon, I found myself in the kitchen, peeling potatoes and carrots, my hands moving on autopilot. I'd seasoned the pot roast and was about to put it in the oven when I stopped, the heavy ceramic dish cold in my hands. Who was I cooking for? The silence of the house answered me. I put the roast back in the refrigerator and sat down at the oak dining table. The second chair, her chair, sat empty. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air where her laughter should have been. The house felt cavernous, hollowed out. I remembered the winter of 2012, when a blizzard knocked out the power for 3 days. Chloe, then in her early 20s, had driven through the snow to stay with me. We'd huddled under blankets by the fireplace, telling old stories and drinking hot cocoa, and she'd said, "I'm so glad I have you, Dad. I'd be so scared alone." Where was that girl now? A full week passed, then another. The roses in the backyard bloomed and faded, their petals scattering across the lawn like pink confetti after a party no one attended. I spent my days in the workshop, sanding wood that didn't need sanding, fixing things that weren't broken, just to fill the hours with the noise of work. One evening, scrolling through the local news on my old tablet, I saw an article. Local accountant claims $15 million lottery prize. There was a picture of Chloe, standing in front of a giant ceremonial check, a dazzling, unfamiliar smile on her face. She was flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. Her friends were there too, raising champagne glasses in the background. My eyes scanned the photo, searching for any sign of the daughter I knew. But her expression was one I'd never seen before. It was triumphant, but also hard, distant. The article quoted her saying she planned to start a new life and invest wisely for the future. There was no mention of her father, no mention of the man who bought the ticket. The article was a gut punch, but the final blow arrived 3 days later, delivered by the mailman in a crisp, white business envelope. It had no return address, just a typed label with my name and a city postmark I didn't recognize. My hands, calloused from a lifetime of work, felt clumsy as I tore it open. There was no letter, no card with a handwritten message. Just two things. The first was a cashier's check, printed on sterile blue-green security paper. The amount was for $5,000. The second was a small, generic note card, the kind you buy in a pack of 100. On it, in Chloe's neat, angular handwriting, were 7 words. For your expenses, be smart with it. C. Not Dad, not Love Chloe. Just a single dismissive initial, a signature on a transaction. I stood there in the hallway, the check in one hand and the note in the other, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. $5,000. After I had sold my 1968 Ford pickup, my one real treasure, for $8,000 to pay for her accounting certification courses. After I had taken out a second mortgage on this very house, a loan of $32,000 to help with the down payment on her first condo. This wasn't a gift. It was a severance package. It was the price she had put on 40 years of my life, on a father's love. I walked into the living room and sank into my old leather armchair. The room was dark, the afternoon light blocked by the heavy curtains I hadn't bothered to open. The air was stale. For the first time, I couldn't smell Helen's roses or the comforting scent of sawdust. The house just smelled old. Empty. I picked up the phone. I had to hear her say it. She answered on the second ring, her voice clipped and impatient. Hello? Chloe, it's Dad. I got the envelope. There was a sigh on the other end of the line, a sound of pure annoyance. Oh, good. It got there. I was hoping that would be enough to tide you over for a while. The phrase hung in the air between us, sharp and cold. Tide me over? Chloe, what is this? $5,000 out of $15 million? Her voice changed then. The impatience was replaced by a hard, condescending edge I had never heard before. Dad, let's be realistic here. What would you even do with millions of dollars? Buy a new armchair? This is more money than you've seen in one place in 20 years. It'll fix the leak in the roof, pay your property taxes, cover your bills. It's a very generous gift. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. A gift? We won this together, Chloe. It was our ticket, our numbers. No, Dad, she said, and her words were like tiny shards of glass. I won. I was the one who claimed the ticket. My name is on the prize now. This is my life, my future. The old house, the Sunday dinners. That was the old life. I'm moving forward. I'm suggesting you do the same. Be grateful for what I've given you. I couldn't speak. The shock was a physical thing, a pressure building in my chest that made it hard to breathe. Grateful. She wanted me to be grateful for this dismissal, for this insult. She took my silence as an agreement. Good. Look, I have to go. My wealth management team is on the other line. This is a very critical time for me. Don't call this number again, it's getting disconnected. My assistant will send you a new contact number for emergencies only. The line went dead. I didn't move. I just sat there, listening to the dial tone's empty hum. The house was silent, but my mind was screaming. Her voice echoed in my head. My name is on the prize now. She had thought of everything. The lawyers, the financial advisors, the new phone number. She had systematically and efficiently cut me out of her new life, leaving me behind with the dust and the memories. The grief I had been nursing for weeks finally burned away, leaving behind something cold, hard, and perfectly clear. I stood up, my movements slow and deliberate. I walked over to the heavy oak desk I built with my own 2 hands the year Chloe was born. My fingers, almost of their own accord, brushed against a small ceramic dish where I tossed stray receipts and pocket change. And then I saw it. Tucked beneath a receipt for wood stain was a small, faded rectangle of thermal paper from Miller's Corner Store, dated 3 weeks ago. Item: 1 Powerball ticket. Price: $1. And suddenly, the memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. The feel of my old ballpoint pen, the way the ink caught on the cheap paper as I scrawled my name, Arthur Miller, across the back. She had been so excited, so distracted by her work presentation, she never even looked at it. She just stuffed it in her purse. She had cashed a ticket that didn't belong to her. She hadn't won anything. I had. A slow, steady calm washed over me. The shaking in my hands stopped. The lump in my throat dissolved. She thought she was cutting a loose end. She was about to find out she had handed her father the scissors. I sat there in the burgundy armchair, the dead phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the monotonous hum of a disconnected line. The sound seemed to fill the entire house, a low, empty drone that vibrated in my bones. For a moment, I felt nothing. It was as if her words had hollowed me out completely, leaving a silent, cavernous space where a father's heart used to be. The grief, the shock, the betrayal, they had been a raging fire just moments before. But now, in the silence, the flames died down, leaving behind not ash, but something solid and cold, like forged steel. The heat was gone, replaced by a chilling clarity. I placed the phone gently back in its cradle, my movements measured and unhurried. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger felt messy, a hot and useless emotion. What I felt was a profound, almost peaceful sense of purpose. I looked around the living room, at the life Helen and I had built, the oak table where I'd taught Chloe to read, the mantelpiece where her first-grade art project, a lopsided clay bird, still sat. She had called this the, quote, old life, a thing to be discarded, packaged up with a $5,000 check and a dismissive initial. She saw it as a dead weight holding her back from her new, glittering future. She was wrong. This house, these memories, they weren't a weight. They were my foundation. And she had just tried to dynamite it. My gaze fell upon the small, faded receipt from Miller's Corner store lying on the desk. That flimsy piece of paper. It was the only thing that mattered now. I stood up, the old leather of the armchair groaning softly, a familiar sound that now felt like a quiet word of encouragement. I walked to the desk, picked up the receipt, and folded it once, carefully, before tucking it deep into my wallet. It felt heavier than a slip of paper. It felt like a key. It was the truth. Chloe was an accountant. She lived in a world of spreadsheets, of assets and liabilities, of calculated risks and returns. She saw me as a liability, an expense to be managed and minimized. She thought this was a financial transaction. She was about to get a lesson in a different kind of accounting, the kind where loyalty and love are the assets, and betrayal is a debt that must always be paid in full. I pulled out a fresh legal pad from the desk drawer and a pen. The first thing I wrote, in steady block letters, was lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I needed someone sharp. Someone who understood that this wasn't about the money. It was about the signature. They thought I was a simple old carpenter, out of my depth. They were about to learn what a man with nothing left to lose is capable of building. They would never see it coming. The morning after that final, dead-end phone call felt different. For the first time in weeks, I didn't wake up with a heavy blanket of grief smothering me. Instead, I felt a strange lightness, a sharp focus that had been absent for years. I made my coffee, sat in my burgundy armchair, and watched the sun rise. But I wasn't just passing time. I was planning. The house was no longer a tomb of memories. It was my headquarters. I opened the heavy, yellowing phone book, a relic in this digital age, but reliable, like an old friend, and flipped to the L section. I wasn't looking for a flashy firm with a face on a billboard. I was looking for a name that sounded like it was carved from the same oak I used in my workshop. Solid, dependable, and built to last. I found it on the third page. Finch, Abernathy, and Cole, Estidus 1978. That Monday, October 21st, I put on my best wool sport coat, the one I saved for weddings and funerals. At precisely 10 a.m., I walked into a quiet, wood-paneled office downtown. Samuel Finch was a man who matched his surroundings. He was in his late 60s, with a neatly trimmed gray beard and eyes that had seen everything. He listened without interruption, his hands steepled on a large mahogany desk. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let a single tear fall. I simply laid out the facts, one by one, like placing tools on a workbench. I told him about the 40-year tradition, the sacred numbers, the Saturday ritual. Then, I placed the 3 pieces of evidence on his desk. The $5,000 cashier's check, the cruel 7-word note, and finally, the receipt from Miller's Corner store. I watched his eyes move from the check to the note, a flicker of professional sympathy in them. But when he saw the receipt, his expression sharpened. "You signed the back of the ticket, Mr. Miller?" he asked, his voice a low, serious rumble. "Every single week?" "Every single week for 22 years, I confirmed. My father taught me. An unsigned ticket is a finder's ticket. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. Your daughter's name is on the claim filed with the State Lottery Commission, which she submitted on October 8th. Normally, possession is everything, but a signature turns a bearer instrument into a contract of ownership. By cashing it, knowing it was signed by you, she didn't just break a promise. She committed fraud. He paused, letting the word hang in the air. This is a strong case, Arthur, but it won't be easy, and it won't be cheap. My retainer is $10,000. $10,000. The number felt impossibly large. It was more cash than I'd had on hand at any point in my life. But I didn't flinch. I just nodded. I'll have it for you by this afternoon. My next stop was the First National Bank of Northwood, the same bank where Helen and I had opened a savings account back in 1987 with our first $500 of spare cash. Over the decades, we'd painstakingly built it up to just over $25,000. It was our emergency fund, the money for a new roof, a medical crisis, the safety net we never wanted to use. Withdrawing nearly half of it felt like taking a chisel to the foundation of my own house. I signed the withdrawal slip, my hand steady. The teller, a young woman who couldn't have been older than Chloe, counted out $100 bills. As she pushed the stack under the glass, she gave me a polite, practiced smile and said, "Have a nice day." I wondered what she would think if she knew this money was the first step in suing my own daughter for $15 million. With the cashier's check for Finch's retainer secured in my coat pocket, I made one final stop. The bell above the door at Miller's Corner Store chimed, the same sound that had marked the start of my Saturday ritual for years. Frank Miller, whose father had been the old man Miller of my memories, was behind the counter, reading the paper. Arthur, he greeted me with a familiar nod. A bit early for your ticket, aren't you? Something like that, Frank, I said, leaning on the counter. I need to ask you something. You've seen me in here every Saturday morning for as long as you've been working here. Like clockwork, he confirmed, folding his paper. One Powerball ticket, same numbers every time. You sign it right here on the counter before you even put your wallet away. My heart gave a steady, reassuring thump. You'd be willing to sign a statement saying that? That you've witnessed me signing my name on the back of that ticket every week? He looked at me, his brow furrowed with concern. Everything all right, Arthur? You and Chloe okay? We will be, I said, my voice even. This is just a legal formality, to clear up a misunderstanding. He held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Of course, anything you need. I left the store and walked home under the pale afternoon sun. The world looked exactly the same, but for me, everything had shifted. I walked back into my house, the scent of sawdust and old roses greeting me like a silent welcome. I didn't feel the crushing loneliness that had haunted me for weeks. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with the quiet hum of a plan in motion. I sat down in my burgundy armchair, the worn leather conforming to my body. I wasn't a victim waiting for the next blow to fall. I was a craftsman again. And I was about to build a case so solid, so meticulously constructed, that when it was finished, it would be unbreakable. The foundation was laid. Now it was time to build the walls. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in patience, a virtue I learned over 40 years of measuring twice and cutting once. My life adopted a new rhythm, dictated not by the sun and the seasons, but by legal deadlines and the methodical gathering of truth. Mr. Finch was everything I had hoped for, precise, relentless, and utterly unimpressed by the scale of the money involved. He treated the $15 million prize with the same dispassionate gravity as if it were a dispute over a fence line. On November 4th, exactly 2 weeks after our first meeting, he filed petition 72C8491 in the county court. The official title was a mouthful of legal jargon. Petition for Declaratory Judgment and Recovery of Assets. I just called it The Reckoning. Signing my name on that affidavit, next to a notary's seal, felt more significant than signing the back of any lottery ticket. The court filing fee was $435, paid for with a check from the savings account Helen and I had started. It felt right, using our money to defend our legacy. Chloe's response came 10 days later, not from her, but from a law firm with a name that sounded like it was made of chrome and glass: Sterling, Price, and Vanguard. The letter was delivered by courier, a thick, cream-colored envelope that felt cold to the touch. It was a motion to dismiss, and its language was designed to humiliate. It referred to my claim as, quote, frivolous, unsubstantiated, and the desperate last-ditch effort of a financially destitute father to extort his successful daughter. The words were like a slap, but a calculated one. They wanted me to get angry, to make a mistake. I read the 20-page document twice, then folded it neatly and placed it on the dining table. They were underestimating me. They saw a simple carpenter. They didn't see the man who could spend 100 hours on a single piece of furniture, ensuring every joint was perfect, every surface smooth, every line true. My patience was my greatest tool. Finch was not rattled. "Standard procedure, Arthur," he said over the phone, his voice calm. "They're trying to scare us off. Now, the real work begins. We're entering the discovery phase." Discovery. The word itself sounded like an adventure, but the reality was a slow, painstaking process of unearthing facts. Finch filed a series of subpoenas that were as sharp and targeted as my finest chisels. The first went to the State Lottery Commission, demanding all documents related to prize claim number 9A44B7G1, including high-resolution scans of the front and back of the ticket. The second went to Chloe's new bank, a private institution called Sterling Trust, where you needed a minimum of $1 million just to open an account. The third and fourth went to her newly hired wealth management team and the real estate agency that had just sold her a new home. We were building a map of her new life, using her own money trail as the guide. While we waited for the documents to arrive, Finch gave me an assignment. "I want you to go through your financial history, Arthur. Find every major expense you covered for Chloe after she turned 18. College tuition, car repairs, rent assistance, that condo down payment. I want copies of canceled checks, bank statements, loan documents, everything. We're not just proving you bought the ticket. We're proving you built the foundation she's standing on." So I spent the cold November evenings in the attic, a single bare bulb casting a yellow glow over decades of my life packed into cardboard boxes. The air smelled of dust and aging paper. It was a painful journey. I found the bank statement from August 2008, showing the $8,000 withdrawal from the sale of my 1968 Ford pickup with a corresponding deposit into Chloe's tuition account. I found the loan documents from March 2015 for the $32,000 second mortgage I took on the house, the one she called the old house. The closing statement from her condo purchase showed that exact amount, $32,000, wired from my account to the escrow company. Each piece of paper was a ghost of a sacrifice I had made gladly, a choice I had never once regretted until now. I compiled a neat stack of documents, each one a silent testament to a father's love and a daughter's profound ingratitude. The first set of subpoenaed documents arrived at Finch's office on November 25th, the Monday before Thanksgiving. He called me in. Spread across his conference table were Chloe's bank statements from the last 6 weeks. It was a portrait of a life I couldn't even imagine. The first major transaction, dated October 10th, was a wire transfer for $1,850,000 to an LLC for the purchase of a penthouse condo downtown. On October 12th, there was a charge for $122, $400 at a Porsche dealership. Then came the flood. $38,000 at a high-end furniture store, $17, $500 at a boutique called Valentina's, a single charge for $26,000 at a travel agency for a first-class European tour. And there, on October 15th, was a transaction that made my blood run cold. A cashier's check withdrawal for $5,000, my severance package. In less than 2 months, she had burned through over $2 million without a single thought for the man whose $1 ticket had paid for it all. The most important pieces of the puzzle, however, were the depositions. Frank Miller was first. We met in a sterile conference room at the Sterling, Price, and Vanguard offices. Chloe wasn't there. Her lawyer said her presence would be too emotionally taxing for her. They sent a young, aggressive lawyer named Peterson, who tried to twist Frank's words. "So, Mr. Miller, Peterson began, leaning forward. "You're claiming you have a distinct memory of this specific lottery ticket sale out of the thousands you conduct every year." Frank, in his simple work shirt, didn't flinch. "I remember Arthur coming in every Saturday morning, around 8:15, for 22 years. He buys one ticket with the same numbers, and he signs it, right there on the counter, with his own pen. I don't remember every sale, son, but I remember a ritual." Peterson couldn't lay a glove on him. Frank's testimony was as solid as the oak counter in his store. Finally, on December 2nd, the package from the State Lottery Commission arrived. Finch called me immediately. "Arthur, you need to see this." I drove to his office, my heart pounding a steady, heavy rhythm. He had an image file open on his large computer monitor. It was a high-resolution scan of the back of the winning ticket. My eyes were immediately drawn to the signature line. There, in big, looping, excited letters, was Chloe's signature. Chloe A. Miller. But underneath it, fainter, pressed into the paper by a familiar hand with a cheap ballpoint pen, was another signature. The ink was slightly smeared, but the letters were unmistakable. Arthur Miller. Finch zoomed in. The pixels sharpened. My name. It was there, hidden in plain sight. Chloe had been in such a hurry to claim her new life that she had simply signed her name right over mine, never even noticing. "Her lawyers will claim it's a forgery," Finch said, his voice quiet. "But we have Frank's testimony. We have 22 years of habit. And we have a forensic handwriting analyst who is going to have a field day with this. They've lost, Arthur. They just don't know it yet." The court had set a mandatory settlement conference for December 5th. One last chance to resolve this before a public trial. I looked at my signature on the screen, a ghost trapped beneath hers. It was time to bring it back into the light. The phone call came 2 days before the settlement conference, on a Tuesday evening. The number was unfamiliar, a sleek string of digits with a downtown area code. I knew it was her before I even answered. I let it ring 3 times, took a slow breath, and picked up. "Hello? You have got to be kidding me." Her voice was a venomous hiss, stripped of all its former warmth. There was no greeting, no preamble. "A lawsuit? You're suing your own daughter? After everything I've done for you." I stayed quiet, letting her words hang in the air. I was sitting in my burgundy armchair, the evening light filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. I could hear the frantic, shallow sound of her breathing on the other end of the line. "That $5,000 wasn't enough for you?" she spat. "You had to get greedy. You had to try and ruin everything for me. My lawyers told me about your little stunt, this ridiculous claim about a signature. You forged it, didn't you? You're trying to steal my money." "The truth is on the ticket, Chloe," I said, my voice low and steady. It felt like I was speaking from a great distance. "The truth?" she laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "The truth is you're a pathetic old man sitting in a dusty house, jealous that I finally made something of myself. This is my life, my success. You have no right to any of it." "I suggest you let your lawyers handle this," I said, keeping my tone perfectly even. "That's what we're paying them for." "Oh, you'll pay all right," she seethed. "My lawyers are going to bury you. They'll paint you as a senile, incompetent old fool trying to cheat his own child. Is that how you want to be remembered?" The line went dead. She had hung up. I placed the phone back in its cradle. The house was silent again. The storm had passed, for now. But I was wrong. The real storm arrived the next afternoon. I was in the workshop, planing a piece of maple wood, the rhythmic scrape of the tool, a familiar comfort. Through the dusty window, I saw a flash of metallic gray. A Porsche, so new it seemed to hum with its own importance, had pulled into my gravel driveway. It looked alien. A spaceship landed in a forgotten field. Chloe got out. I had never seen her look like this. She wore a severe black pantsuit and sunglasses so large they hid half her face. She moved with a stiff, angry energy, her expensive heels digging into the loose gravel. I put down my plane, wiped my hands on a rag, and went to meet her at the back door. I didn't invite her in, just stood there on the threshold. "We need to talk," she said, pulling off her sunglasses. Her eyes were hard, narrowed with a fury I had only seen in glimpses before. "I don't think we have anything to talk about, Chloe." "Don't you dare." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "You will drop this insane lawsuit, right now. You are embarrassing me. You're embarrassing this family." "This family?" I asked, a genuine note of curiosity in my voice. "I thought you were moving on from the old life." Her face tightened. "This is not a game, Dad. They've frozen my accounts because of your petition. My accounts! I have a mortgage payment of $16,000 due on the 1st. I have plans. This money is for my future, not to be wasted on your fantasies." "It seems you spent a lot of it already," I stated simply. $2 million in less than 2 months is quite a burn rate. She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. "You have no idea what it takes to live my life now, the people I associate with, the circles I move in. You sit here in this museum, smelling of sawdust and decay. What could you possibly understand about my world?" I looked past her, at the rose bushes Helen had planted, their leaves just beginning to turn with the coming winter. They were the only spot of vibrant color in the gray afternoon. "Your mother loved this house." "Oh, here we go," she rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "Bringing Mom into it, how predictable. Let me tell you something about Mom. She would be ashamed of you right now. She would want me to have this life. She wouldn't want me to be tied down to this place, to you." That was it, the final cut, the one that severed the last, frayed thread connecting us. I felt a profound and sudden calm settle over me. The anger, the hurt, it all just evaporated, leaving behind a cold, clear certainty. I looked her directly in the eye. My voice, when it came, was quiet but carried the weight of a final judgment. "You are not to speak of your mother in this house again. The settlement conference is tomorrow at 10 a.m. Be there. Or don't. It makes no difference to me." I stepped back inside and closed the door, the solid click of the lock echoing in the hallway. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't need to. I walked back to my armchair, the fortress of my old life, and sat down. The house was quiet. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with my resolve. She thought the fight was about the money. She thought it was about her new life versus my old one. She was about to find out it was about something much simpler and much more powerful. It was about a name, signed in ink on the back of a $1 ticket. The conference room was on the 23rd floor of a glass and steel tower downtown. It was a cold, anonymous space, designed to have no personality at all. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and weak coffee. A long, dark mahogany table, polished to a mirror shine, reflected the gray December sky outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. This was her world, not mine. It was a place where value was measured in square footage and quarterly reports, not in sweat and sawdust. I sat with my back to the window, my lawyer Samuel Finch to my right, my hands, calloused and familiar with the texture of wood, rested on the cool, smooth surface of the table. They felt out of place. Across from us sat Chloe and her lawyer, Peterson. She was dressed in a crisp, cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my property taxes for the year. Her face was a mask of composed indignation, but I saw the slight, nervous tremor in the hand that held her designer pen. Peterson, all polished shoes and confident smile, started the proceedings. "Let's not waste each other's time," he began, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. "My client, in a gesture of profound generosity and to put this unfortunate family matter to rest, is prepared to offer Mr. Miller a one-time, non-negotiable settlement of $100,000. Contingent on the signing of a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement." He said generosity as if it were a word he had just learned. I didn't look at the paper, I just looked at my daughter. She refused to meet my eyes, focusing instead on a point on the wall just over my shoulder. Mr. Finch didn't even glance at the offer. He simply pushed it back across the table with 2 fingers. "We are not here to negotiate your client's generosity, Mr. Peterson. We are here to discuss the legal ownership of prize claim 9A44B7G1. He opened his briefcase and laid out a series of neat, tabbed folders. His movements were calm and economical. "First," he said, his voice filling the quiet room, "we have the sworn deposition of Mr. Franklin Miller, owner of Miller's Corner Store, testifying to a 22-year history of my client purchasing a lottery ticket every Saturday morning and signing it in his presence before leaving the store. He slid a bound document towards them. Peterson waved it away dismissively. Secondly, Finch continued, undeterred, we have documented proof of my client's significant financial contributions to Ms. Miller's life and career, including the $8,000 transfer from the sale of a classic vehicle to cover tuition costs, and the $32,000 second mortgage on his primary residence to fund the down payment on her first condominium. He placed the stack of bank statements and loan agreements on the table. This establishes a clear pattern of paternal support, not financial desperation. Chloe flinched, a barely perceptible tightening of her jaw. It was the first crack in her mask. And finally, Finch said, turning his laptop around to face them. He clicked a file, and an image filled the screen. It was the high-resolution scan from the State Lottery Commission. The back of the ticket. We have this. He used the mouse to zoom in on the signature line. Chloe's bold, looping signature was clear, but underneath it, fainter, yet perfectly legible, were the familiar strokes of my own name. Arthur Miller. The room went utterly silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. Chloe stared at the screen, her mouth slightly agape. The color drained from her face, leaving her expensive makeup looking like a layer of paint on a plaster wall. That's a fake, she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy whisper. She turned to Peterson, her eyes wide with panic. He forged that. Tell them he forged it. Peterson wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the screen, his confident smile gone, replaced by the grim, tight-lipped expression of a man who knows he has just lost. He knew, as Finch and I knew, that our forensic handwriting expert had already certified the signature's age and pressure patterns as authentic. It was over. Finch closed his laptop. My client is the legal owner of the ticket and the full $15 million prize, he stated, his voice calm and final. He is willing to waive any claims of fraud against your client in exchange for her immediate and full relinquishment of all remaining prize funds, which currently total $12,842,500, as well as the title to the penthouse condominium and the Porsche, both of which were purchased with his assets. No, Chloe breathed, shaking her head. No, he can't. She finally looked at me, her eyes pleading, desperate. The fury was gone, replaced by a raw, terrified panic. Dad, please. You can't take it all. It's my life. You'll ruin me. I stood up, my old joints protesting slightly. I walked around the table until I stood directly in front of her. She looked up at me, a stranger in a stranger's clothes. You ruined yourself, Chloe, I said, my voice quiet, not with anger, but with a profound and unshakable sadness. You stood in my driveway yesterday and told me your mother would be ashamed of me. But you were wrong. She would be ashamed of this, of what you've become. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the $5,000 cashier's check she had sent me. I placed it on the table in front of her. This is what you decided our family was worth, and so this is what I'm leaving you with. I turned and walked toward the door, Mr. Finch falling into step beside me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The image of her sitting there, alone at that vast, polished table, with nothing but her choices and that worthless check, was burned into my mind forever. The power had not just shifted, it had returned to its rightful owner. Walking out of that conference room was like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel into the light. I didn't feel triumphant or victorious. I just felt quiet. The drive home was a blur. When I walked back into my house, the silence that greeted me was different. It wasn't the heavy, lonely silence of the past few months. It was a clean, peaceful silence. The air smelled of sawdust, and the faint, sweet scent of the last of Helen's roses clinging to the autumn air. For the first time in a long time, it smelled like home again, not like a tomb of memories. The first thing I did with the money was not to buy a new car or a fancy watch. I went down to the bank and paid off the remaining balance of that $32,000 second mortgage I had taken out for Chloe. The bank officer handed me the paid-in-full document, and holding that piece of paper felt more satisfying than holding a winning lottery ticket. I used a portion of the funds to establish the Helen Miller Foundation for Young Artisans. a scholarship fund that provides grants of $10,000 each to young woodworkers and craftspeople starting their careers. It's what she would have wanted. My life didn't change much on the surface. I still live in the same house, drive the same 10-year-old truck, and drink the same black coffee every morning. The real change was internal. The gnawing anxiety about bills, about the future, was gone. I was secure. I was free. I did hear about Chloe, not because I sought it out, but because small towns talk. Her fall was as swift and spectacular as her rise. The Porsche was repossessed. The penthouse was sold at a loss to cover legal fees and the debt she had accumulated. The last I heard, she was working for a temp agency, living in a small, rented apartment on the other side of the state. I don't feel anger when I think of her. Just a deep, profound pity for the woman who traded her entire history for a few weeks of glittering emptiness. The $5,000 I left her wasn't an act of cruelty. It was the final lesson. Money you haven't earned has no real value. It's just paper that burns quickly. My burgundy armchair, which had become a vessel for my grief, is my throne again. I sit here in the evenings, not staring at a silent phone, but reading old books and listening to the radio. I hired a young landscape architect, a recipient of Helen's scholarship, to help me restore the rose garden. We spent the spring bringing it back to life, and this summer it bloomed more vibrantly than it has in years. The house is no longer the old life she so casually discarded. It is my life. It is my kingdom, built with my own hands, secured by my own resolve. The lottery ticket was never about the money. It was about a dream, a connection between a father and a daughter. She broke that connection, but in the end, the ticket gave me something far more valuable than $15 million. It gave me back my peace, my home, and my self-respect. Some things you just can't put a price on. If you liked this story, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments what you thought. I really want to know your opinion. Here you will always find stories that move, surprise, and bring lessons to take with you for life. My burgundy armchair, which had become a vessel for my grief, is my throne again. I sit here in the evenings, not staring at a silent phone, but reading old books and listening to the radio. I hired a young landscape architect, a recipient of Helen's scholarship, to help me restore the rose garden. This summer, it bloomed more vibrantly than it has in years. The house is no longer the old life she so casually discarded. It is my life. It is my kingdom, built with my own hands, secured by my own resolve. The lottery ticket was never about the money. It was about a dream, a connection between a father and a daughter. She broke that connection, but in the end, the ticket gave me something far more valuable than $15 million. It gave me back my peace, my home, and my self-respect. Some things you just can't put a price on. This whole ordeal taught me a hard lesson. Wealth isn't found on a lottery ticket. It's built over a lifetime, in the calluses on your hands and the love you pour into your family. When that love is betrayed, it feels like the foundation of your world has cracked. But it's in those cracks that you find out what you're really made of. You find a strength you never knew you had. My story is a reminder that dignity is not for sale, and respect is something you must be willing to demand, even from those you love the most. A signature on a piece of paper can be a powerful thing, but the signature you leave on the world, through your character and your actions, is the only one that truly matters. If you liked this story, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments what you thought. I really want to know your opinion. Here you will always find stories that move, surprise, and bring lessons to take with you for life.